break their back trying to know God exists.
Well, I think a lot of people are trying to start with so here's medieval. Oh man, I really shouldn't do this. I'm going to try because now I'm on YouTube. Hello, YouTube. People can clip this if they want to, be upset. Let me do all of medieval Jewish philosophy in like 5 seconds. You can reason your way to God, but you don't start reasoning your way to God. You start knowing God exists, and then you can reason your way to God. That's medieval Jewish philosophy in a nutshell. And that I actually believe is the proper way to do it. If you go in knowing that God exists, oh, we're in Deuteronomy here still. Let me get over to, that's still not right. That's better. When you know that God exists, then you can look at the world and reason, I see the genius in X, Y, Z. And it's, by the way, what we're going to read in Heschel on radical amazement and wonder, on awe and wonder. In the first part of his book is going to be vis-a-vis seeing God in creation and just kind of allowing that to be your starting point.
I don't mean to derail.
No, go for it.
It's easy to accept being doctrine and say, I know God exists. But I think to believe, to know that God exists, for me, I had to have some kind of experience, not just somebody telling me that God exists.
I can understand that. I just want to go to Deuteronomy 5:6, since this is a Talmud study class, but just anyone who's joining us online, bear with me for just a second. So, so interesting. Do we have any English language commentaries I can share here? No, only this one. So they use Maimonides uses the quote of Anochi Adonai Elohecha asher hotzetecha me'eretz Mitzrayim miveit avadim. I am the eternal your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, the house of bondage. And that is the quotation they're using to know that God exists. Another one here, wow, it even pops up like this, is the same thing from Exodus, essentially. I am God who brought you out of the house of right. So we know that God exists because we were redeemed from Egypt and we exist. And so that's the foundational point. Having a personal encounter with God is something we can't possibly count on with people. Instead, it's part of why we created the Seder. It's why we start with it's why that's such a foundational moment for the Jewish people. Our understanding of the Exodus is how we understand God. I'm trying to come up with wise things to say on the fly, and sometimes my brain doesn't quite connect all the connections. So you get some winners, you get some losers. But that's all I got to say on that at this time.
Largely Catholics and the Christian, all the different kinds of Christian religion base so much on fear. How does Judaism focus on courage?
Mm-hmm.
How does Judaism focus on courage?
Yeah, courage to know God.
Does it take courage to know
Or does
God?
courage open the window? Or
the funny thing is, I'm not sure it takes courage. It could. I'm not, but I'm thinking of from my own experience. It took me no courage to say that.
It just happens.
It might take courage in a different society. In a society that was militantly atheistic, it would probably take courage to admit that, but in America, it doesn't. You know what I mean? Like courage is dependent on the situation. And in America or in Israel, me saying, I'm a Jew and I believe in God, people are like, okay, great. Right. If I were to go to Iran and say or China and say I'm a Jew and I believe in God, that might take courage. Because I would probably get murdered in both of those places, but definitely the first one. So courage is, that's what I mean when I say courage is dependent on other things. I don't think it requires courage to fulfill this mitzvah. Different mitzvot do require courage at different times. It's easy to say also, like, quite frankly, like, what's another one? Like, if you are, I don't want to use that example. Like, it's situation dependent. I don't want to get us too off track, but it's situation dependent. I don't think it takes courage necessarily, especially here. I think what it takes is a willingness to step out on a limb, to step out on a branch, to step out on medium ice and say, I believe something, even though I understand there's a shot I could, like, I could be wrong, but this is what I believe. And I don't think that takes a lot of courage.
So much of,
Especially because we're here to pull you back out of that ice if you if you fall in, like, you've got a community. Yeah.
where I was coming from is so much religious spirituality, I'm not saying Judaism, is based on, I do believe in God, I do, and you don't make that happen. But you can follow a practice which will help you to understand what you are being called to in your life.
Maybe the interesting thing is called to in your life. We don't.
There's
Yeah.
an invitation?
Well, I mean, it's invitation. It's interesting. I'm thinking about it because I'm trying to turn it over in my head. I think Judaism isn't really something we invite anyone, even ourselves, into. It's something you have to take hold of. But I say that and not use the word choose, because, like, Daniel, you became bar mitzvah a couple of years ago. How much choice did you have in the matter?
Kind of choice.
Kinda, but
If you want.
kinda. but like, it's I'm not saying that's a problem. What I'm saying is it's not it's just, it's not that we're not inviting people to
You're telling me not to
to
compartmentalize that process.
right. It's just, it's like there's no invitation. You're supposed to step up and own it. At 13, you become bar bat mitzvah, regardless of whether you have a ceremony and a party. Because Judaism, you don't have any opt-out in Judaism. If you were born of Jewish parents, that's just what happens. You're a Jew and you do Jewish. And to be fair, up until 150 years ago, not even 130 years ago, that was the only real option. Over 200 years ago, there wasn't a Jew on earth who had, besides in the United States for the brief period it was there over 200 years ago, that had, like, direct citizenship. Maybe in England at that point, but we had just gotten past, prior to 1800, it was like nobody had citizenship anywhere. There was no idea of being a Jew and just doing something other than be Jewish your whole life. What were you going to do besides convert? You were just going to be a Jew who did whatever you did for your whole life. And hopefully you raised a family, and hopefully you had a good time, and hopefully you helped make the world a little bit better, that led to the world we have today, which is a little bit better, minus the internet. And then hopefully we're all making it towards that messianic age, so that the Messiah will come, B'ezrat Hashem. And we will find that our suffering had meaning after all. But anyway, I've lost my own train of thought at this point, so I've said all of the screaming I'm going to scream about this particular question, and we're going to move into the Talmud. Okay. Once again, the screen did the thing where I need to get to. We're going to hear from Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel about halacha, kind of. Okay, so the Gemara begins by clarifying the rationale for Beit Shammai's opinion. Beit Shammai's opinion, just to go back. Okay, so Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel disputed the proper way to recite the Shema. Beit Shammai would say one should recite Shema in the manner indicated in the text of the Shema itself. I gotta be honest with y'all, I love Beit Shammai. I'm a total Beit Shammaiist in my deepest Jewish heart of hearts. I agree with Shammai on so much, even though the Talmud says we don't agree with Shammai on. There's like 3 things we agree with Shammai on. Everything else is Hillel. But like, I think Shammai is right about a lot of things. I love Shammai's Hanukkah candle argument, but meh. Anyway. So he says the way it says to do it in the Shema, that's how you do it, right? Everything Shammai says should be said with a little bit of like a meh. You know, he's kind of that's kind of who Shammai is. So he's like, so therefore in the evening, every person must recline on his side and recite Shema in fulfillment of the verse when you lie down. That says Ufshach Bacha. And in the morning, he must stand and recite Shema in fulfillment of the verse when you rise, as it states, Uvkumecha, where it says, Uvshach Bacha Uvkumecha, that you will lie down and you'll rise up. Okay, does that make sense? We're like, okay, Shema. Shammai's like, okay, this seems pretty easy. It says lie down and rise up. So in the evening, you lie down, you say it. Morning, you rise up and you say it. Makes perfect sense. Beit Hillel says every person recites Shema as he is. And he may do so in whatever position is most comfortable for him, both day and night, as it is stated. And when you walk along the way, right? Which is also from Ve'ahavta. So you can, since it says you can do it when you walk along the way, which is neither standing still or reclining, you must be able to do it in any position. And okay, if you have questions, and also my question to you is why? Why can you say it? Why is he saying you can say it anyway? Why aren't we giving the Shammai has this simple but fitting of the text, respectful of the text way, and Hillel is saying, do whatever you want. Almost. What's going on? What's going on here? Before the text give us the answer.
I think there are 2 things.
Okay.
One, on the complete, going by the word, Shammai says, well, the word tells you, lie down, recline, or stand up. But Hillel argues, it also says when you're walking. When you're walking, you're not reclining. So
right.
That's going by the literal word. But I also think what's going on is that Hillel, in a way, says, let's create a big tent.
Yes, that's what I'm getting at. What Hillel's saying here is he's trying to say, if we make the same thing, the tension the rabbis face up until today, right? I go to Hartman every summer. This is a real tangent. And every summer on Saturday afternoon before Seudat Shlishit, everyone knows what Seudat Shlishit is? Seudat Shlishit is the 3rd meal of Shabbat. Now you might say, okay, you ate 3 meals that day? Cool. We eat 3 meals. No, used to be you would only eat 2 meals a day. But on Shabbat, Jews would eat 3 meals. They ate the Friday evening meal, the Saturday morning meal, and then another meal before they would have their dinner in the waning hours of Shabbos. And it was called the 3rd feast, or Seudah Shlishit. And it's usually a gathering to eat it's like a nosh, really, kind of, before dinner. It's like appetizers. You might have barekas or dolmas or so, like hummus, something like that. Not like a big plate of steak or something. But we would have a Seudah Shlishit thing, and before we did Havdalah, they would have a speaker. And this is like hundreds of people. So they used a microphone. But how did they use a microphone on Shabbat? Well, in Israel, they have halachic Shabbat microphones,
Wow.
which are powered inside a box that has been powered since before Shabbat, and for which the microphone is just on with a speaker underneath it. And so if you use that, you can still use it because you're not doing anything, you're not technically violating Shabbos. In this country, we don't do it a lot. Maybe in Orthodox communities, they have it a little more. In Israel, this is a thing. And I saw that and I said, okay, I respect what the rabbis today, Orthodox rabbis today, are trying to find a way to be modern. They would like to have a speaker on Shabbat, say. They'd like for everyone to hear the speaker on Shabbat. But they don't want, so they need a microphone. They need one. They got to have one. And so now they can. The Haredim probably wouldn't use it. But the Orthodoxim use it, the rest of the Orthodoxim. And that's enough for me. If we can get Reform, Conservative, and Orthodox online with something, remember that Haredi Jews are only about 2% of the Jewish people. So when Orthodoxy sides with us, they're totally out. Their only hope is for Orthodoxy to side with them, which they do on many things, but they don't always. My point is, the tension is that we want to get people to do Jewish things, to be Jewish together, and respect halakha. And the rabbis, this tension isn't new. It's been happening since the Zugot. It's been happening since before the fall of the Second Temple. And for 2,000 years, we've been arguing about how much we change over time. And we have changed over time. If Hillel today came and saw, if Hillel went to Kehillat Israel, an Orthodox synagogue in Overland Park, I'm not sure how happy Hillel would be. Maybe Hillel would be thrilled. I hope so. But it's very different from the Judaism that Hillel envisioned, even today. It's a little different anyway. Okay. So yes, Hillel here is trying to keep the tent open. Make it so that Hillel believes that if I say that you can say Shema laying down or standing up and that it's effective, or walking and it's effective, you're more likely to do it than if I said you had to do it a specific way. Yeah. No. Yeah. All three paragraphs through Michamocha and Hashkivenu in the evening. No, in the morning it's a different one. You're putting me on the spot. I'm trying to remember. No, Yotzer Or is part of it, but Yotzer Or is earlier. But yes, but yeah. Yotzer Or is in there too, right? It's code for the Shema Uvir Chotecha. It's code for the Shema and its blessings, not just. And you'll even see, like, when parents, I know Reform parents who sing their kids the nighttime Shema before bed, and that includes Hashkivenu. Hashivenu is a different prayer.
Is that the one you say in the morning? Because you don't say Hashkivenu.
No, but you don't say Hashivenu. Hashivenu is about return to God. We will return. It's said usually around the High Holy Days because it's about like the day. It's like we will return to God and not sin anymore because we're so sorry. Like it's a kind of penitential. What's the in Hebrew? Sorry, you guys aren't gonna. Doesn't matter. Tachanun. It's like Tachanun. They're prayers of repentance. Tachanunim, call them. Okay. So if we can do it any way we like, the way Hillel said, why does the Via have to say when you lie down and when you rise up? Ushochbecha uvkumecha. Why does it say this? The Gemara says that this is merely to denote the time. at the time when people lie down and at the time when people rise, right? We don't say it because we expect them to do those things. We say it because those are when we want them to say it. So the Gemara is saying this is one of those imkain, you might think, but you shouldn't think, because that's not, it's where the Talmud is saying you might think it's because like we have a problem here because it says this, but he's saying don't do it. But it's not that he's saying don't do it, he's saying it refers to time and not action. Right? So with regard to this halacha, Rabbi Tarfon said, once I was coming on the road when I stopped to recline, right? And we've read this part before, at least in one part. And what happens? He was a student of Beit Hillel and he decided to recline like Beit Shammai, and he did that because he was like me. He said, oh, deep down, I'm really a Beit Shammai. I love that rigorous, those you got to do the halacha the way, like I really like that rigorousness. What happened? He endangered himself due to vandals and highwaymen because he took too long and he was laying down on the ground. He's laying there and he's like, I have to say the Shema like this. And somebody comes by and he's like, this guy can't even see me coming. I'm going to come and, give me your money. And what could he do? Nothing. He's sitting there laying on the ground. The guy got the jump on him. So he's like, this is terrible. Clearly there's a thing. The sages said to him, you deserve to be in a position where you are liable to pay with your life as you transgress the statement of Beit Hillel. Which, wowza, right? That's a big... the rabbi's coming in to be like, well, nobody made you be a total idiot. This was totally your choice. And okay. So what does that mean, though? What do the rabbis mean when they say you were in a position to pay with your life? And this is where we're going to talk about Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel a little bit. So the Gemara comes in now. It says, okay, let's talk a little bit about Beit Shammai's. Let's talk about these opinions just a little bit. Granted, Beit Hillel explained the rationale for their opinion and the rationale for Beit Shammai's opinion, right? The one thing we know about Hillel, one of the reasons Hillel is the victor, we explained, is that Hillel always explained their opponent, Shammai's position, and always explained it first before they presented their position, that's got to be, the rabbis see that as the height of rabbinic conduct, respect, and also, quite frankly, it's a flex, right? Do kids still say flex? I don't know. I'm going to have to now translate flex for everyone. It's a show, right? He's so powerful. Hillel knows the Torah so well and is so sure of his positions. He can afford to put Shammai's opinion first. He's like, it's okay. I'm going to win anyway. So it's a flex a little bit. He's like, oh, I'm so smart. I'm so much better than you. Let's talk about Shammai's opinion and then we'll get to mine, right? So it's a little bit of that. Anyway, so it explains here to you that what I just explained, Beit Hillel explained both the verse that ostensibly supports Beit Shammai's opinion, and the verse that proves their own explanation is more reasonable, the one that says when you walk along the way. What is the reason that Beit Shammai do not state their opinion in accordance with the opinion of Beit Hillel? The Gemara will answer you. Beit Shammai could have said to you, he could have said, if so, imkain, we get that imkain again, that the verse means only to denote the time, as Beit Hillel said, then let the verse say, in the morning and in the evening. So the Gemara is going to fight Shammai's battle for him because Shammai didn't do the work. He didn't do what Hillel does. He didn't, right? Because Hillel, by putting Shammai first, it's not like it's just respect. It allows you to do the thing we sometimes do when we make arguments with other people. You say, yes, you said this, but then let me smack it down. And Hillel could do that because they said, here's what Shammai said, but here's my text. And then they don't need to say anything else. But Shammai just says, here's my opinion. Go with it or don't. It's not a smart way to do it, they're saying. So they're going to fight this battle for him. They're saying he could have said in the morning. So they're going to fight a battle they don't even believe in. They, by the way, are never going to take Shammai's side. So, well, not never, but not so it's like, okay, let's see. So it could say in the morning and in the evening. So why does it say? Why is it ambiguous? Why does it say when you lie down and when you rise? Why use actions to mean times when we have words that mean times? Why didn't he just say times? It must mean that at the time of lying down, like actually physically lying down, is when you recite Shema, actually lying down. And that when you rise up, you say it when actually rising. That way we include both the time meaning and the physical meaning. Why is that bad? And Shammai should have said that, but he didn't. And the Gemara continues asking, and what do Beit Shammai do with this verse? In other words, there's another thing Beit Shammai could have done that they didn't do, which is they could say, let's reinterpret Hillel's verse that Hillel uses to mean you can do it anyway. We could reinterpret that verse. That's another way we could do this. So they're going to say, right? And they're going to say, so what do Beit Shammai do with this verse? And when you walk along the way, which Beit Hillel used to prove that every person recites Shema as he is. In other words, Beit Shammai already uses this verse for something. Why didn't they make it part of their argument? Right? The rabbis are really raking Beit Shammai over the coals here. It's like they didn't do their homework. You know, it's like you take math. What happens if I were to ask you, crazy question, forget it, I don't know math. I mean, I know a little math, but like crazy math algebra question. And you just wrote x equals 2. How many points would you get? Because you didn't? You didn't show your work. Beit Shammai's not showing their work. They're jumping to the end a little bit. And the rabbis are real frustrated because they have to do this work for them now. The Gemara, long after the Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel are dead, pretty much everybody in them, the Gemara has to come in and the rabbis of the Gemara have to come up with these arguments because otherwise there's going to be Torah left on the cutting room floor. We need Shammai. The rabbis are frustrated with Shammai because they need Shammai, but Shammai's not showing up fully to the fight. Kind of, if we're calling it a fight. You know what I mean? Yeah?
They need Shammai because they want.
They need both of those verses. Yes, they respect Beit Shammai. They don't think Beit Shammai is dumb, but they need them at fighting strength. You know, if you had a big debater or something, I don't know, what's a big thing? There's a Super Bowl later today. God forbid, if one of the teams loses by 30 points, it would seem, well, okay, God forbid the Chiefs lose by 30. The other team can lose by 30 points. But like, if one team shows up and loses by 30 points, then they probably didn't do something right in the lead up to this game because they had 2 weeks to prepare, and to lose by 30 points would be really embarrassing. This is Shammai losing by 30 points in the Super Bowl. This is him showing up to the argument with Beit Hillel and saying, yeah, it says lay down and rise up, so do that. And Beit Hillel has this whole argument. The rabbis are like, Beit Shammai? And he's like, I already said what I think. and they're like, okay. Like, I mean, we can all imagine such a situation and be like, okay, now I see why they're a little frustrated with Beit Shammai. They're half this presentation and they're not showing up. So anyway, so the Gemara answers, Beit Shammai need this verse in order to derive other halachot. As it was taught in a Baraita, which interpreted this verse, that the obligation to recite Shema applies when you sit in your home, to the exclusion of one who is engaged in performance of a mitzvah, who is exempt from the recitation of the Shema because of that mitzvah. There are only a couple. There aren't, look, if you're like, you can't say what's a mitzvah that you would do on just a given day? If you're out picking up, oh, that's like you're beautifying the earth. Fine. You're out picking up garbage at 10 o'clock at night. Let's say. Is that a reason why you're exempt from saying the Shema? No, that's not a mitzvah. Why? Because obviously you could just say that, go home, go to sleep, say the Shema, clean up the next. Yeah, it's crazy making. Like, it's like, that's silly. There's no need to change that. But there are certain mitzvot where we want people's head in the game in the evening. So one of them, and when you walk along the way, to the exclusion of a groom. A groom, shortly after marriage, is exempt from saying the Shema. We want his focus on pru uravu, to be fruitful and multiply. We don't want his focus on prayer or Shema or none of that. He doesn't have to put on tefillin. He doesn't have to do none of it. He doesn't have to go to communal prayer. He doesn't have to go to Shiva. He doesn't have to do almost anything except try and make babies.
How long into it?
It's different based on how long it takes. Because if you don't succeed after a while, well, to be fair, if you don't succeed after a really long while, they make you get divorced. But if you don't succeed after a while, they're like, okay, but now you have to get back to like life, because it's, so after a month, I think you have to go back to doing it one way or the other. But for a little bit, there's a grace period and you're exempt while you're a chatan, which is a temporary period. It's like when you're when you're a bride, there's a lot of big traditions that go along with that. But shortly after your actual wedding, you're just a lady now. You're not a bride anymore. You're just a married lady. So that's the way it goes.
Your responsibility to attend to your wife is even more than your responsibility to God, or equal to, or more to. One is,
well, but that is your that's your highest responsibility to God.
Yeah. Yeah.
Your very highest responsibility to God. Yeah. So, well, yeah. I mean, yeah, and I mean, technically, I'm going to say that's not, because there's an earlier commandment than that, but yes, that is one of the earliest commandments, and certainly we are to understand that we are to be fruitful and multiply if we can. Look, the rabbis will also come back and say, look, there's a number of reasons why someone might not either be capable or didn't meet the right person or didn't this, that, or the other, and like the rabbis are not going to condemn you for not doing it if you tried and for some reason along the process it didn't work out. But like, that's what we want the groom to be focused on right after marriage. Yeah.
Waxing too progressive to say it's not even just about being fruitful and multiplying, it's about being loving and respectful.
You're being too liberal. Yeah. It's got, believe me very clearly, it's got nothing to do with that. I'll just be extremely clear with you. It has everything to do with multiplication of the Jews, and nothing to do with how you treat your wife. You're supposed to treat your wife well, but that's not. The other sexual thing also, people like to take the thing. There's a part of the Talmud where it says, if you're a sea captain, you have to have sex with your wife every 6 months. If you're a wheat thresher, you have to do it once a month. If you're as the jobs get less strenuous or further away, the more you're required to do so. But it's not out of like love or niceness or pleasure. It's again about not just multiplication, but about like making sure that you're keeping your marriage going. So like it's the purpose is functional, not emotional. It's afternoon, and I already said the word sex 3 times, so you're allowed to leave if you want. Okay, we will continue. I'm just going to come up with the weirdest ways to end Daniel's portion of our classes. Well, again, let's just thank you, Daniel, for being with us, and we'll see you next time. Okay, so that's so when I say so Beit Shammai, right? To the exclusion of a groom who is also exempt from recitation of the Shema, the Baraita adds from here from this interpretation of the verses, they said, one who marries a virgin is exempt from the recitation of Shema on his wedding night, but one who marries a widow is obligated. So if you marry now they're saying, well, just the Baraita said it's not quite that simple, is what happens here. The Baraitot come in, they're extraneous rabbinic material who come in just to make a point. And in this case, it comes in just to say that only applies if the wife is a virgin. The wife was not a virgin, which the only answer can be widow. That's the category here. Almanah is the phrase for it. Then you are obligated to say Shema. Yeah.
Why? Couldn't a widow bear children just as well?
Maybe. That's a good it's a good question, but maybe not. I don't know the answer to that. Let me see. Right. So what the Baraita is actually saying, I think, is that it's making your point for you. The Baraita comes in to say, if this was about who is supposed to do Shema and who's not, what about this other rule? Shouldn't, if one marries a widow, couldn't they also be exempted? As you said, isn't it possible? It is possible. It's not their, I think it becomes their ruling, but let's get there. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, because we're going to talk about the groom more. So my mashma, right? So like, what are we, how do we know? Like, how have we heard this? This, it says, how may it be inferred? So the Gemara clarifies the meaning and asks, from where may it be inferred that the verse, when you walk along the way, exempts a groom from the obligation to recite Shema? We're saying all this as if we know it to be true. And they're like, wait. Let's go back to the beginning. Right? Okay. Rav Papa said that we learn ki derech, ma derech reshut, like the way, just as the way described in the verse is voluntary, af kol reshut. So it is with all these voluntary activities, and invokes no mitzvah. So too, all of those who are obligated to recite Shema are engaged in voluntary activities. However, one engaged in the performance of a mitzvah, like a groom, is exempt from the obligation to recite Shema. We shouldn't stop here, because if you're going to say to me, this is one of those like Rav, oh, okay, it's like, okay, like a way, right? Because it's a way, meaning it's not obligatory. It was a choice. What's the impact of that? What would the impact of Rav Papa's words be for halakha, which is literally the way? It might mean halakha isn't mandatory, is voluntary. That would scare the rabbis hopeless. It would scare them very much. They don't want to say that it's voluntary. They want to say they're trying to make it accessible, but they do not want to say it's voluntary. So this becomes a very important delineation. Who gets exempted from mitzvot? And Rav Papa is saying, no one is exempted from mitzvot, but doing mitzvah. And now let's go on to this next bit. The Gemara asks, are we not dealing with a case where one walks along the way to perform a mitzvah? Right? And this is where we get, this is like, doing halakha is doing mitzvah. Like they're like, what are you talking about? They're kind of the same. The Torah did not designate the objective of his walk. What is someone walking to do when one walks along the way, as V'ahavta says? Are they walking to do mitzvot, or are they walking to do something voluntary? The Torah did not designate the objective of his walk, and nevertheless, the Torah said to recite Shema, indicating that one is obligated whether one set out to do a mitzvah or not. They said it didn't say he's walking to not do a mitzvah. It didn't say he's walking to do a mitzvah. It just said he was walking and said Shema. So why are we exempting anyone? Where's the exemption coming from? Right? Rather, the proof is from the formulation of the verse. Im kain, if so, lichtov, let the Torah write, when sitting and when walking. So if so, that the intention was to obligate in all cases. So you might think, like we just said, obviously everyone should be should be obligated to recite Shema. But if that's true, why doesn't the Torah say when sitting and when walking instead of or when walking? Why does it say you should do it when sitting and walking? Why does it say both? Doesn't that mean, I don't know. What is the meaning of when you sit and when you walk? See, this is separating it out. Why does it say when sitting and walking? Why does it say when you sit down and when you rise up? It clearly sets two different times. Why doesn't it just say, when you say when sitting and walking, what is that? In English, we hear that and automatically mean everything in between, right? There's a word for that, but I can't remember it. It's not tautology. There's a word for when you, two words encompass the entire range between the two words. That's what the Talmud is asking. Why isn't it that? Why is it separated?
In Old English, it's twa onum, be both, while between both.
I don't know that, so it could be, but I can't compare it, because I don't know that phrasing. But yeah, so why does it say it when you sit and when you walk instead of when sitting and walking? Certainly, these additions come to emphasize in your sitting down and in your walking, meaning that when one does this for his own purposes, walks, and of his own volition, whatever he's on his way to do, he is obligated to recite Shema. But when he does with the objective of performing a mitzvah, he is exempt from reciting Shema, as in the case he is sitting or walking at God's behest. The conclusion is that anyone engaged in the performance of a mitzvah is exempt from the recitation of Shema. If so, Ihachi, even one who marries an almanah should be exempt, for he too is engaged in the performance of a mitzvah, as you pointed out. That, however, contradicts the Baraita. The Gemara responds that there is nevertheless a distinction between one marrying a virgin and one marrying a widow. One who marries a virgin is preoccupied by his concern, lest he discover that his bride is not a virgin. While one who marries a widow is not concerned, is not preoccupied. The conclusion is that the groom is exempt from reciting Shema because he is preoccupied, not because he's on his way to do a mitzvah, but because he's worried that his wife isn't actually what was sold to him. Remember, what's the difference in a ketubah for a betula and an almana? A betula and an almana, a virgin and a widow.
Gotta be significant.
The virgins is how many zuz? Oh, 200 zuz. It's like a year's salary in these day and age. How much is an almanaz? 100 zuz. Half as much. He could have saved a year's salary if it turned out she was lying. That's why he's confused. That's why he's concerned. The almanah, you already paid only 100 zuz. Even if it turns out it's been 100 dudes, doesn't matter. He paid the right price already. He's not worried. Yeah.
Doesn't work in reverse. But
No, we don't care about her. The rabbis are not concerned with her concern.
whether he's a virgin.
No, it's not relevant. His virginity is not irrelevant. She doesn't pay a bride price. She doesn't pay a ketubah upon divorce. He does. It's like you saying to me, like, well, I'm sorry, this is going to be offensive. Sorry, Marsha. But like, it's like you say, like the car outside is like, oh, you didn't fill me up with premium. It's like, it's a car. It doesn't have any claims on you. Sorry. In this case, it's saying the wife doesn't have any claims on you because the ketubah is the only thing that determines claims. And the ketubah is just a promise that the husband will pay so that she isn't destitute should he divorce her. Now remember, up until 1000 of the Common Era, a man could give a get without his wife's permission. He could just divorce her and be like, here you go, here's your document, get to stepping. And then Rabbeinu Gershom, along with we love Rabbeinu Gershom, he's the one who said, don't open people, he had the big 3 takanot. Big one was polygamy. We all remember that one. Don't do polygamy. Don't open people's mail. And the third one, of course, that people keep forgetting, I don't know why mail gets remembered and this one doesn't, but is that a husband can't divorce a wife without her consent.
So is that the point at which our rabbis start to say this misogyny is terrible?
No.
Oh.
It's got nothing to do with misogyny. Again, it's like you just want to take this 21st century lens and stare down at the rabbis, but Rabbeinu Gershom 1,000 years ago, no, it's not about kindness. It's about what he believes the Torah obligates us to do. Everything for them is about what the Torah obligates us to do. It's not really about what's good for people, because what's good for people is doing what the Torah tells us to do. You know what I mean?
How can I say this?
Sure, do it. Just yell at me.
I understand what you're saying, that it's wrong to impose our values or mores today on another time and culture. But what that culture is saying, it seems to me, is that God doesn't hold women in the same significance that he holds men. How could we want a Torah that portrays God like that?
Well, I would say that I don't believe God is saying that this has anything to do with the inherent dignity of a human life. God was very clear that every human being has an equal dignity and worth in life. This is a financial matter to make sure that a woman, to be fair, the rabbis would say, hey, the rabbis would say, even though you don't like how this is framed, the alternative is that this woman is treated the way everyone else on earth treated women at the time. In other words, could just be thrown out of the house with nothing. So they'd say, even if we don't share your mores or your values, you're still getting a better deal here than anywhere else on earth this time. So if your values are so strong that they survive a journey back in time 1,000 years, Lauren, then first of all, mazel tov. Second of all, know that the rabbis are doing better by women than any other group of people on planet Earth at every point in Jewish history. At every point in Jewish history. Does that mean we're doing great and wonderful and it's always perfect? No, I never said that and I don't mean it. We should have been better about the equality and egalitarianism between men and women from Sinai. I would have loved that. That's how I feel and that's what I would like. I can't deny the way history unfolded. I wouldn't do that. That would be unfair to you, to us, to the Torah, to God.
I recognize that.
I'm just fighting. I'm just pushing back with you.
Yeah.
Feel free to hit back at me.
Years from now, somebody might look at my mores and say, how could you have been so blind?
Just give it 100 years, Lauren. I promise they're going to say it.
Yeah.
About me, about you, about all of us. But guess what? I don't care. We are living and interpreting the Torah the best we can today. In 100 years, that'll be their problem. They'll interpret the Torah. Me, I'll be dead. It won't be my problem. I assume, because it'll be past 120. We should all live to 120. But in 100 years, I would be 136, so I will definitely be dead by then. It'll be somebody else's problem to interpret the Torah for that age, not mine. Hopefully they'll use my writings if any of it was good. That's all I got. That's all any of us got. I mean, it's like we can go back and judge the people 1,000 years ago on literally everything. They were worse in every conceivable way than we were. Are we going to feel better about anything? Is that going to change the world today any to go back and obsess over their failures? I'm not sure it will, but their wisdom is still useful to us. Hence why we remember Rabbeinu Gershom for these takanot and even keep them in effect after his 1,000-year injunction. And we don't remember any rabbi who said, here's why I think slavery is really good, right? We remember the writings of Dr. Heschel, and we don't remember the writings of some of the Southern rabbis who were like, segregation's pretty good. It happened. They wrote that. I've got a whole collection. I wrote a paper in one of the years of rabbinical school about rabbis in the South who had to deal with conservative congregations and struggle with the civil rights movement. There are rabbis on the good and bad side of history in every time of whatever, and we only know what's good and bad based on what we think today. So yeah.
You're being a psychiatrist.
No, I think I'm just shouting, but
No. Judaism has to be perfectly sensitive always and about everything. Yeah. And it isn't. It's a human. It's part of your human creation, and nothing human is perfect.
Well, that's certainly true. Right. And this is again going to be one of these really long, interesting things, but I'll just go here, and it's the Gemara is going to ask. Again, remember, we said that we just ended with the Gemara saying the reason a groom would be exempt from saying the Shema is only if he married a virgin, because he might be preoccupied about whether he got a good deal on the bride price. The Gemara asks, if the exemption is due to preoccupation, remember, if you thought that was the answer, you're if the exemption is due to preoccupation, then even one who's preoccupied because his ship sank at sea should also be exempt, right? Any big financial loss. Oh, he might lose half a year's salary worth if he made the wrong choice. What if somebody lost their ship in their business at sea? That could be half their year's salary to replace. Do they also get exempted from saying the Shema because of their preoccupation with financial matters? So they say he should also be exempt. They don't really mean that. The Gemara reinforces is going to go even and say, and if you say that in this case as well, if you were to say that we agree with you, Gemara, that person should also be exempt. Why then did Rabbi Abba Bar Zavda say that Rav said, you can come in and just hang out?
Yeah, this sounds exciting.
A mourner is obligated in all the mitzvot mentioned in the Torah except for tefillin. Right? So Rav said, and Rabbi Abba Bar Zavda passed it along, that a mourner is obligated in all the mitzvot except for tefillin, which means they are also obligated to say Shema in the morning and evening. From which a mourner is exempt, as the term splendor is stated with regard to phylacteries, because you say, make no mourning for the dead, bind your splendor upon yourself. And that's what you're doing when you wrap tefillin on your arm and over your forehead. It is inappropriate for a mourner to wrap himself in phylacteries or tefillin, with regard to which the term splendor was employed. If a mourner who is clearly pained and preoccupied is obligated to recite Shema, then certainly all others who are preoccupied with such small things as financial matters, not life and death, even one whose ship sank at sea, whose loss was merely monetary, should be obligated. So why then is a groom exempted because of his preoccupation, and one who lost his property isn't. The Gemara answers, there is a distinction. For there, in the case of the groom, he is preoccupied with the preoccupation, so I kind of gave you the answer at the beginning, of a mitzvah that he must perform. Here, in the case of a ship lost at sea, he is preoccupied with the preoccupation of a voluntary act that he chooses to perform. So we're getting back to the distinction between his preoccupation is with mitzvah versus a preoccupation with dirshut, or it comes from reshut hapratit, which means the private domain, something you chose to take on your own. Remember, what did the rabbis say about the student about Rabbi Tarfon, student of Rabbi Hillel, who did the Shammai laying down and got robbed by a highwayman?
You asked for it.
You asked for it. You took on a stringency we did not impose on you.
Yeah.
The rabbis do not want you to take on, to be machmir, it's called. The rabbis do not want you to be like, I'm going to be the strongest, whatever. Like, that's why Shammai doesn't win, quite frankly. Not that they don't respect his interpretations or his devotion or his stringency. They respect it, but it's not the way they're going to make the rules for everyone. And they don't want people to decide that it's more beneficial to take on stringencies. Sadly, the Orthodox community of the world today doesn't look a lot like the Orthodox community did 100 years ago. That's because they've taken on far too many stringencies, too many fences that they themselves invented to try and keep them from being like us. But in fact, by doing so, I argue they've actually, they've transgressed this, the mitzvah of moderation. Which,
a lot of it based on their response to Reform Judaism.
a lot of what's happened in Orthodoxy, especially from the 30s and 40s on to today, is basically, how do we prove we're not like them? Orthodoxy didn't even call itself Orthodoxy until we came up with our name, until Reform existed.
They were just the Jews.
They were just Jews who did, or traditional Jews, or Jews of particular nusach, yeah.
It sounds frivolous, but I'm allowing myself to do it in the spirit of Gemara.
Got it. Yeah, yeah. Okay.
So if I go to my bridal bed, thinking about the commandment to be fruitful and multiply, I'm excused from saying Shema. But what if I go to my bridal bed just in fashion and sexually aroused, not thinking about the commandment? Don't I then need to say Shema?
No,
No.
because you did, and doing is 60% of the battle.
It doesn't, your action is good, your brain.
Your
brain's
intention
not
doesn't-
working.
No, it's not that it doesn't count. We really want you to do the action. We want you to get your head in the right place. But you know what a rabbi, even these rabbis would tell you if you went to them on the first night, after the next day, first of all, they'd say, go back home and sleep with your wife. But but if you showed up the next morning and said, Rabbi, I'm sorry, but I just couldn't focus on the mitzvah. All I could think about, my wife, she's beautiful. I just couldn't think. They'd be like, cool, go home and do that. They'd be like, we don't care why you're like, I mean, yeah. Would it be great if you were like the ultimate tzaddik and you like, the only thing I have in my mind the whole time is fulfilling the Torah? Like, that would be great, I guess. But they're like, you're also a human being, and like, okay, like, that's fine. Like, again, like, they just wouldn't be, except for Shammai, who might be like, now I have to chase you with a builder's cubit. Like everyone else would be like, cool, stop bragging about how hot your wife is. Go home. Like, I'm an old man. My wife is also old. Thank you. Like, it's like, great. Go home, do your thing, come back in a month when we're good. Like, it's like, there just wouldn't be that. You know what I mean? It's like, once you're exempt, you're exempt. We don't care until you're chayav again, until you're mandated. You're patur, you're exempt. Get out of here. And that's quite frankly the same reason why they say, even though it only says women are patur, not asur, not forbidden from time-bound positive mitzvot, they say they're exempt. And so when we say, well, women might choose to not be exempt, they're like, that's dumb. Once you're exempt, you're exempt. They're like, it's like you're doing it at that point is taking on a stringency, which they're against. That's how we argue about the egalitarianism part. All right. Thank you to everyone online. Appreciate having you and enjoy the Super Bowl.